Okay, so now that I have the Pringleboard set up here so that all the black keys have pins glued in, I can say a few things that maybe a video is going to be a little better medium to digest this than just typing text online. First, a few things. With the Novation Impulse that I have here, you can see that I didn't have to cut anything to make it fit on the half unit, though as the keys go higher and higher and higher, they get slightly off so that I have to offset the pin blocks as they go higher to try and get the pins to come out more in the middle of each black template stripe. Now, when the pins are all glued in, a couple of things about this keyboard. Number one is I found that the depth of the black keys is not all that great in terms of distance for pressure. So it's very important to get the pin heads that you can't see too well here because they're painted black with nail polish. They have to be just about touching the fingerboard to try and get as deep a pressure into the pad as possible. And even so, for a lot of them, you can kind of hear. If I'm just off a little bit placing that pin, if it's just a little bit above the fingerboard, full pressure on that key is not going to be equal to full pressure on the fingerboard. Now that's probably okay because rarely do I press all the way into the fingerboard, because the great expression that you can get out of it obviously is very much at the top of the fingerboard to about halfway in, then pressing all the way down. But even so, on some of these I was a little bit off, trying to get about a 1/16 of an inch above the fingerboard. And some of these are a little bit above, but you can hear as I push that one fully down, it doesn't go near to the full volume that I can when I press my finger. So I'm going to have to adjust that one down so that it's just about touching the fingerboard. And there's nothing I can do in these black keys. The only way I can make them depress further is to kind of carve out more space where I have this little rubber pad stops them from pressing down. I guess that's possible. But you know what? I'm kind of happy with the finger with the keypad giving me the lighter, less forte kind of sound. Though probably for the next one I do, I'm going to want to try and make the black keys get the full pressure on each key. Now the white keys press down further, so I'm not going to have that problem here. Another issue that we've been discussing in the forum is the tuning of these things. Now you can tune them with a needle nose plier. And that little pin can be moved quite easily, a little bit left or right, to get you to within a cent on each one of these things. But I'm still not convinced that's gonna really solve the problem of perfect tuning on a lot of these patches. If we can just, I don't know if you can see this here. This one is kind of tuned off 2 cents from where I had it, where it was dead nuts on. Now one of the things is the way I have my keyboard here, it's just laying on top. I'm going to have to come up with a fixed mount for this so that it never moves in position. There's even playing, it might move slightly, but the tuning is within a couple cents on these keys, so I don't think it's something you're going to hear that much. But if you really want to get it, to within a cent on every key, it's going to have to be totally solid in how it sits on the fingerboard. Now, even if you do have it in tune. And let's just take an example. So here, this one is, I don't know, a couple cents off. Yeah, they are really, as you press harder or softer, you can get a little change. This is only off like a cent, cent and a half, and fluctuating back and forth. Of course, the problem now is going to be if I take another sound, that's just a sine wave. Let's go to a wind. If I go to the wind and do the same thing. See, I'm 11 cents off there. So, as someone brought up on the forum, different patches are going to have different effects on tuning, and just because you're dead on the sine wave doesn't mean you're going to be dead on when you bring some other patch up. So that's just a few things to think about. Another thing that you must do when you build one of these things is be exact, and that's where I screwed up a little bit. We're doing everything by hand, sawing by hand, drilling by hand. Really, I need a little drill press. I need an electric saw where I can saw all these things to exactly the same dimensions. And one of the issues was that when I had to drill the holes into the keys to put these little pin holders in, I didn't exactly drill the same exact distance from the bottom of the key for each of these things. That's shame on me. I should be a lot more exact when I do this. So if you're planning on doing it, start with the intent of being totally exact and get yourself the right tools to let you drill the same place on the key every time, the same place on your pin blocks if that's how you're doing it every time. And when you put them on, number them, because if you take them on and take them off and they all look the same, you'll never get them back in the right place. So at least I was smart enough to number everything so I could make sure every pin block goes where I wanted it to. All right, all that said, let's play around on it a little bit. It's really quite different than a keyboard. You are like pressing on the fingerboard, the keys are spongy. All right, that brings up another issue, because when you build one of these keyboards, you have to pretty much have your pins at the back of the fingerboard so you have enough space to play the fingerboard. If you have patches or presets that use Y in some way, the keyboard might not be that effective for you. It might actually be playing a modulated sound where you don't want one. In this case, on the wind sound, it's actually quite nice, because on the bottom here, there's a lower sound on the bottom, but at the top it's higher, and so so that's kind of nice to use the wind sound, where you can go all of a sudden to this kind of fixed pitch, kind of high sound. It's really fun to play, and to be honest with you, for those who say I don't need a keyboard, I always want to have my expressive fingerpad sound. You know what? I kind of like having a difference here, there, where I can have a fixed kind of a timbre without any modulation on it. It really is. It's kind of strange playing something that has no white keys on it. But it's really, really fun, and just like the fingerboard, you can play very lightly. So lightly here that you can kind of hear the wind sound come in before the... Now, that doesn't happen at that place on the key, but it does at the back here, the way the patch is created. So I can, it's a very light touch just to hear the noise sound there. But you can do it on that key because you can get extremely fine dynamic shaping with the keyboard with this technique that Peter Pringle invented. All right, let's go to some other sound though, because if we go to, I don't know, let's go to our string sound. If you have a sound, you can get, you have to practice, but you can get a seamless transition between a finger pad and that's one of the great things about the fingerboard, the ability to play chords without fear of making a mistake. A lot of times I think you're going to want to play chords in one hand to some expressive melody on the fingerboard in another, and the keyboard is excellent for that. So it's time for me to do a few adjustments on here, I think, to try and get them more even. Fortunately, I just used wood glue here. I'm going to be able to get that out, I think, okay. And the way I've done it, I can just fill that in with some plastic wood re-drill and put another post in. That'll be no problem. But now it's time to put the red keys on and really take this thing out for a spin. So for those who really want to attempt this, I wholeheartedly say give it a shot. And if you can get your hands on a Novation Impulse 49 and you have the half unit, it almost exactly fits. The only difference is it has a few keys on the bottom that you won't be able to use, and there's one key at the top that I just don't have on the keyboard to be able to get me that high note. But how many times do I use that note? I can live without it. And as we said before, you don't have to do too much with the Impulse keyboard to make things fit the template of the fingerboard exactly. So I think I'm going to go off and try and put this thing together now, and I'm going to have to go out and get myself that some way to mount this permanently. I love the hinge that Peter uses to just pull this up and bring it back down in the same place every time. I'm going to try and do that too. That's a great idea. So I hope it didn't bore you, but give it a shot. I think you're going to like this if you create one for yourself.